In today's video, I'm going to show you a really easy technique to add extra texture to your quilting projects. Hi, I'm Kim Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts. I'm a quilting teacher and I'm the host of The Quilter's Way, an online club where quilters learn and grow in a fun and supportive community. Now before we get started today, I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel and be sure to hit that bell so you'll be notified the next time I release a new video. I recently got this book called Tucks, Textures, and Pleats by Jennie Rayment. Now this is an older book published in 1994, but it has some amazing ideas in it for manipulating fabric and giving some really interesting dimension and texture to quilting projects, home deck projects, even garments. So I started off with one of the first projects he's showing you to give these tucks to fabric. So you can see what this looks like here. And it's not that hard to do. I thought it was going to be quite difficult, but it really isn't. It involves marking and it involves stitching. We're used to doing that, right? So let me explain how this all works. So I have this piece of fabric here, and what you do is you go along and you mark different widths on it. So in this particular case, I marked them every inch. So you can change that if you want, but let's just stay with the inch for now. So I use my friction pen to do that so I can erase it later on. And I marked an inch on one side of the fabric, inch, inch, inch. So you're going to need your ruler, of course, to do that. Any ruler will work actually. And then I did the same thing on the other side. So the marks on each side should line up with one another because that's exactly what we need them to do. So once I had that all marked, the next step was actually to pinch a mark on either side. The ones that are directly across from each other, don't pinch a diagonal one, that's not going to work as well. And then you're going to fold your fabric down like this. So you want to make sure that the fabric underneath lines up with the fabric on the edges, okay? So you have a nice even line across there, okay? And I'm folding it down. You don't need to press it or anything like that. I've got my machine set up for actually piecing, my quilt piecing, and I'm going to stitch in 1/4 of an inch in from that fold. Now you can stitch in different widths, it gives different textured effects, but I'm just going with my 1/4 inch foot on this particular machine, on my Janome M7. I have my HP foot and HP needle plate in. So what I'm going to do is just stitch along. So I'm using a stitch length of about 2. You don't want to have a really long stitch length, but it doesn't have to be really tiny or anything like that. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to stitch on my leader first before I get into my project. All right, and then I'm just going to start stitching 1/4 inch in from that fold. So I'm using the edge of my HP foot along the edge of the fold. All right, so I've stitched down. You can see I've just got that stitched down. It's almost like top stitching really, if you will. Now the one thing you need to be careful of that happened to me when I was doing this is that, you know, you folded this under and you've got fabric underneath that you do not want to stitch on. But guess what I did the one time? I actually got it stitched on. Here's the first one I did, and I had this underneath that got caught and it got stitched as well. So just be a little careful as you're folding that your fabric underneath is laying flat and not getting caught up in that tuck. So there's one done, right? So you're just going to keep going along. And I want to do at least 3 here so I can show you the next step on it. So I'm just grabbing either side and the marked area on the other side, and then let's just check and make sure things are lying nice and flat underneath there. Okay, and out of the stitching area. That's what I want to make sure we don't get that caught in there. So let's go again. Okay, so I've got 2 tucks. Let's do one more. Okay, I have to have at least 3 or 4 here to show you the next part of it, because that's where you start getting all the interesting texture. You can make some decisions there on how you want to do that. So we have our 3 tucks here. So we've stitched vertically, and the next thing we want to do is stitch horizontally, and this requires a little bit more marking. So this will depend, you might have to do a little bit of math on this, but what I did is I went in 2.5 inches in from the edge of the fabric. Okay, so I'm just going to mark these across here. Okay, and then I'm going to mark in from the other side 2.5 inches, and then in my particular case I could then mark 2 inch, 2 inch, and 2 inch. But like I say, you may have to figure out how far you want to go and then divide it up evenly because you want even spaces in there. And now before I actually do any more stitching, what I want to do here is I actually want to make these all lay down in one direction so you could iron them, and then just stitch 1/4 inch in on either side to hold them there. Okay, so I'm going to go iron them down, I'm going to stitch the 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to come back and show you the next stitching we're going to do. So now I'm marking in the 2.5 inches from the other side, across these, and then I'm going to mark 2 inches from those lines in on either side. So put that one there, make sure this works first, and that should be another 2 inches. Perfect. Okay, so I'll just mark these 2 inches up from there. It's always good to check first to make sure it's all working okay, and then actually make sure your ruler is going the right way. I have a 6.5 inch ruler, so if I use that mark, it would actually be marking it in 2.5 inches. Not good. Okay, roughly, and then 2 inches in from that side. Okay, so there I have my line. So this means I'm going to stitch on these, but I am not going to just keep stitching across because I want to get these nice changes in direction as I go along. So I'm actually going to stitch my first line. I'll just go along here, and I'm stitching right on the lines. Okay, it's not a 1/4 inch or anything like that. It's right on the line. So I'm going to stitch this one first, and then before I stitch this one, I want to actually change the direction on these. Okay, I'll still be able to see my little marks there a bit. It should work okay. I can see where I start and end, so that shouldn't be a problem. But you may need something like a stiletto to help keep those little tucks in place. You can use your finger if you want, but if you don't want to get your fingers that close to the needle, use a little stiletto. So I'll show you how that works in just a sec. So let's start with this one. We're going to go in the same direction as we stitched the 1/4 inch seam in to start with. So you can do lots of different things here. I mean, you could have one going one way, one going the other way. You can go back and forth. You could have the ones at the end going one direction, everybody in the middle going a different way. Like, you can do all kinds of different things. So let's just keep it simple for a start here. So I'm going to go down and lock my stitches here. And I'm going to stitch across. Lock my stitches again. Break my thread. Okay, so now when I'm coming to this next one here, I actually want to stitch in this direction. Okay, I'm going to move it around so I can do that. And what I find easiest is I start stitching and I'll stitch into the first tuck and then stop, and then I'll maneuver the next one by hand or by my stiletto first. So I'll show you what I mean here. Let's lock our stitches. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I've already got this one down. I only have a few to work with here, so it's not bad. But when you have a whole bunch of them here, you can't hold them all down. So the next one I would do is I could go and use my stiletto. I prefer to use my fingers, but again, whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay, and the last one's coming down there. And lock our stitches. Okay, so now you can see what this looks like. So you can see it's going in the opposite direction. Now when I come back here, I'm probably going to go this way again, all right? Because I'm reversing direction every line I stitch, right? So let's go back here. Okay, and this one, they all want to go that way because that's how I pressed them at first. So this is easier. All right, so you can see that's shifting in direction. And then of course we're going to go the other way again, right? So if you really need some extra guidance on this, you could, you know, move them all down and draw your line on it, but I can eyeball it as I go along, so it's working okay for me. Okay, so we'll start with this one little guy here. You just want to make sure that you don't actually, you know, if the tucks are close together, that you don't want to be stitching on, you know, like if I had this down and I was stitching on this tuck in the wrong direction and this one in the direction I want them all to go, that wouldn't be good. Okay, so you can see what this looks like. So you've got these changing directions and stuff going around. I could have changed this one first maybe and should have maybe, but whatever. It's just an experiment. And so when I'm done here, what I want to do, of course, is to take my iron and remove those marks that I have on there. But when you make a whole bunch of them, like this example, you can see how interesting that is. And it's hard not to be doing this to them all the time. And so if you're a garment sewer, this would look really nice on the bodice of a dress, for example, even on the hem. If you are a quilter, you might wonder, what am I going to do with these? Well, first off, what I would think of is the center of a block, right? So if you think of like an autograph block or some of the star blocks where they have, you know, a center that's just one piece of fabric, I think this would be look really nice in the center. And if that was the case, I would make sure that the fabric piece I was working with was the size of that center, maybe a little bit bigger, and make sure you come in a bit because it does pull in the fabric a little bit. But if you were working with a 6.5 inch block, normally you might cut it 7, for example, and make sure you come in a little ways, and then you could put it in the center of your quilt block, and it would look really interesting. You could even have one going one direction and then one going the opposite direction, you know, in the different blocks you have in your quilt. And I think that look really interesting. So if you're interested in doing that, you could take a look at Jennie's book. She has several books, but Tucks, Textures, and Pleats is really interesting. And this is just one of the techniques. This is the first technique she talks about. Lots of other ones. This would also look great on home deck projects such as pillows, for example. Would be really interesting to do. So thanks for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your quilting friends. And if you'd like more helpful quilting information, please go to chatterboxquilts.com.